As we get closer to the NBA playoffs, I have to figure out what teams are for real in terms of their chances of actually winning the NBA title. Are they frauds? Are they actual real contenders? Now, in terms of possible frauds, right now, there are 6 teams that I am really struggling to figure out. And the first team on that list is the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, if you guys watched the contender video that I made not too long ago where I ranked some of the top tier contenders, Cleveland was in that video. But I still want to talk about them in this one because I really like them this year. And I also really liked them last year. This is a team that lost in the first round to New York. They won one playoff game last year. And some of the not even issues, but some of the characteristics of this team are very similar to last year's team. So for Cleveland, part of the reason they're so difficult to figure out is one, because of the lack of postseason success last year, and obviously a ton of regular season success last year and this year, but also they've had guys in and out of the lineup. Darius Garland, Evan Mobley both missed a ton of time, and they were really good in that stretch, despite the fact that obviously they're playing a pretty easy schedule during that time period. Now those guys are back, and they're still playing well, but maybe not as well as they were, and it's a really difficult team to figure out because I wonder if all their pieces really fit well together. They made a point in the offseason to get guys like Max Strus, Georges Niang to help fill out the roster, to have a legitimate wing that can guard a little bit and can shoot, which was something that they were missing last year. But as talented as this team is, it makes me wonder if a lack of fit is going to potentially hold them back in the postseason. On the other hand, I think they're very talented, and I really believe in Donovan Mitchell's ability to be a top tier player in the postseason. He has a history of being a fantastic playoff performer, and so I don't want to count out this team. Right now, I don't think they're frauds. I think they certainly have a chance to make a postseason run, but I thought that last year as well. And so right now, I'm just finding myself wondering if I'm overrating Cleveland this year, just like I presumably did last year. Next up on the list, let's talk about Phoenix. Again, it's kind of like Cleveland. I find myself on the more positive side of the Suns debate than it seems like a lot of people do. I still kind of just subscribe to this notion of like, okay, if they have Booker and Durant and the game is close, they're going to have one of the best closing groups out there. As long as games are close, they're going to be one of the best last 4-minute teams in the league with those two guys trying to go, basket for basket for those two players. And then of course you put Bradley Beal in there as well. Now, obviously from a matchup perspective, there are matchups that they're going to struggle with on occasion with size and different things like that. But I really don't think that there is a team in the West that the Suns just can't beat. I don't know that they would be favored in a lot of, top tier series against some of the other better teams, against Denver, against Clippers, against Minnesota, but they have the firepower offensively to be in any series. The reason I know that is because even last year with a less complete roster, they arguably gave the Nuggets their best series. It was either them or Minnesota. They took 2 games off them, and yes, it took some crazy performances from Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, but that's kind of how this team is built, is like they have star power and they have enough other pieces to make it to where if those guys have great games, they win. I'm still kind of a believer in Phoenix, but the fraud part of this to me comes in with potential health issues with Jusuf Nurkic, a little bit of lack of size, lack of role players, all that stuff. But I just am not going to count out a team that is led by Kevin Durant and Devin Booker in the postseason. Obviously, there are certainly question marks with Phoenix, but I don't think they're frauds at all. Next up now, though, is a team that I have been fooled by before, and that is the LA Clippers. Now, they really shouldn't be on the list if you look at some of the statistics and where they are in the standings. They clearly are a contender on paper. But because this is the Clippers, we need to discuss whether they are for real or not. Because going into the bubble in 2020 and prior to the league shutting down, I thought that the Clippers were the best team in the league. And I thought that they would win the title that year. They would be the favorites to win the title. Obviously, that didn't happen, and they had a complete collapse in the bubble. And so I've believed in this Clippers team before, and now I find myself believing in them again. And I'm wondering, am I making the same mistake all over again? This is an extremely talented team with great depth, two-way players. This team is even better than the one that went into the bubble, but it is still the Clippers. And it's not just that as well. It's some of the lack of postseason success with James Harden. It's the injury stuff. But to me, if this exact same roster existed for a different team, I would have basically no doubts about them apart from some of the issues with Harden, but he isn't really going to have to do nearly as much because they have 2 other great players in Kawhi and Paul George. And also, Kawhi has been dealing with some injury stuff for the last couple of seasons, and I think people maybe have forgotten just how good he was in the 2019 postseason with Toronto. And if we're getting that version of Kawhi, the way that we have gotten a really good version of Kawhi all year this year, he is one of the best postseason performers that we have. And when you have the rest of this roster around him as well, the Clippers are very legit. But because they're the Clippers, I have to find myself wondering, okay, am I just getting tricked into this? Speaking of, we also have to talk about the Miami Heat. Now, it's not even that I believe in the Heat. It's not even that I think that they're going to make a postseason run this year. I've just been proven wrong too many times, and I'm just not going to go against this group. They absolutely could be, quote unquote frauds. When you look at some of the numbers, the standings, all this stuff, there are not a lot of things that tell you that they're going to be a really good team in the postseason this year, but that was the case last year as well, and the year before that, and the year before that. And this is just a team that finds a way in the postseason. They had to be mentioned in this video. I don't even know if they're frauds or not. I don't know if they're tricking us one way or the other of like, oh, we assume they're going to be good in the postseason. They're actually not, but Miami had to be in the video. Next up, what about the New York Knicks? This is a team that made some in-season improvements. They bring in OG Anunoby. They've been missing Julius Randle for a while. Jalen Brunson has been amazing this season. And I've kind of started to buy into the idea of the Knicks as contenders, depending on what the matchup is. Not necessarily this year, but last year they played Boston strangely well with not as good of a roster as what Boston had. So I'm always keeping an eye on that. There's a toughness and an energy level that they bring to the floor and a confidence level that I think could carry them past even more talented teams like Milwaukee and Philadelphia potentially if Joel Embiid is healthy. And I'm trying to prevent myself from basically saying that the Knicks might be the second best team in the Eastern Conference. Like that is like the thing they might be tricking me into. That is like the fraud watch part of this with New York is like, am I overestimating how big of a difference OG Anunoby made? Am I overestimating what Julius Randle could be in the postseason when in the past we've seen some really negative performances from him? But it's not his team anymore. It's Jalen Brunson running everything. There's something about this Knicks team. There's something about them actually having a chance to make the conference finals, having home games at Madison Square Garden. There's something there where I can envision them making a conference finals run. But again, maybe I'm getting tricked into that. And then the last team that has to be mentioned here is the Golden State Warriors. Now, I've talked about them in some recent videos just in terms of what kind of moves they could possibly make in the offseason, what their postseason is going to look like, or excuse me, what their offseason is going to look like. But they're kind of like the Heat in the West for me, where they have Curry, they have Draymond, they have this foundational knowledge of how to win championships, they have good players, even some of the younger guys that haven't really been tested in the postseason. And if you want to tell me that the Warriors make the conference finals, I'm not going to tell you you're crazy. And again, maybe I'm getting tricked into that. Maybe they are frauds. Maybe they can't guard. Maybe they're not big enough. Maybe they are too reliant on Curry. Maybe they don't have as many complementary options as you'd like for them to have around a guy that still in stuff is very, very good. But I just can't. That's kind of the theme of the video, right? Like I can't bet against any of these teams, I don't feel like. And Golden State certainly is on that list, especially with how they've played over the last month or so. Now they could go into the postseason as a play-in team or as the 6th seed and be underdogs, and depending on the matchup, just be out in one round and barely even win any games in the postseason. But because of some of the foundational knowledge that they have is with their past championship performances, I keep finding myself thinking that Golden State's going to do something in the postseason. They're going to at least provide a tough matchup for somebody, and maybe that could lead them all the way to the conference finals. But you guys let me know down in the comment section below, how are you feeling in terms of the fraudulence level of all of these teams? There's 6 teams in the video. Are you concerned about them in the postseason? Do you feel like you're getting tricked into them? Or are you like, yeah, 100%, absolutely, these are contending teams? Because that's what I'm trying to figure out right now.